Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and our non-binary babies out there, because there are some. Welcome to the very first episode of Live from the CRJ, the official podcast of the Dillard University Center for Racial Justice. I am Lawrence Weber. My pronouns are he, him, they, and them.
My name is Tia Suggs. I'm the project coordinator for the Center for Racial Justice, and my pronouns are she and her.
And this is our very first episode. I am very excited. I know you're probably very excited too.
Yes, it's been a while.
So, like I said, I am actually a new addition to the Center for Racial Justice. I'm the new project assistant, and I hope I have not broken anything so far. I'm more than sure I haven't, and if I did, they would definitely tell me. Y'all would definitely tell me if I broke something so far, right?
Definitely.
Okay. So for those of you who do not know what our center is about, let's tell you a little bit about the Dillard University Center for Racial Justice. Now, our mission here at DU Center for Racial Justice is to bring systemic change to communities of color and via various things. Can you go ahead and expound on that, Ms. Tia?
Yes, the Center for Racial Justice is a reservoir for lectures, research, advocacy training, student travel, civic engagement, and political participation. The Center for Racial Justice provides paid internship opportunities within the center and throughout the community to mold the next generation of equity leaders.
And we have been doing a lot. I mean, I have been here since August, and in the short month that I've been here, we've been all over the place. The most recent we did was the 12 Acts of Kindness based on Muhammad Ali's teachings, and that championed a number of young people in the community just to work with those basically work with those acts of kindness, and be a change in their communities. And I'll just say this. When I first started here, it was a big change for me. But moving forward, it has been a change that I am so glad that I am a part of, because I mean, I have seen the various events that we have done, the various things that we have talked about, and being particularly overwhelmed at how amazing I don't know how you guys do it. I'm still in awe, and I work here.
Yeah. I feel like working at the center, we do a lot of events within the community. We do a lot of events for our students. We champion for a lot of social injustices happening within our community in New Orleans and around the world, around the country. The last event we did was the Muhammad Ali 12 Acts of Kindness, and before that, I took one of my student interns to Washington, D.C., and we went to the Congressional Black Caucus Conference, which was amazing, which if we could afford to, we'd take every single student at Dillard, because that's how relevant and important those topics were at the conference.
And I think another big thing about that was the notion of, just as alumni, as a former student here, a lot of times our students, bless them, they have a tendency to be very focused on their studies. They're focused on their studies. They're focused on their work. And when they get that sort of little bit of kick in the pants to certain injustices out there, it opens up their mind, it opens up their world, and that is how I hate to use the term woke, because it's just been kind of perverted in the last few years, but it for lack of a better term, it just kind of awakens them to the change that they can be in the world, which I absolutely love, and I absolutely love being a part of.
Yeah, and one thing I definitely believe in is anyone can be an activist, any age, any color, anybody. And the biggest thing is bringing awareness and making people aware. And the wokeness is being aware and bringing exposure to social injustices. And that's what I love about our center is we're preparing and building up youth activists within college, within high schools, within middle schools. Like we're any school that's willing to take us, we're coming. And we have a social justice training that we do to teach any age group about social injustices and picking out discrimination and learning about all type of issues that's going on in our community.
Absolutely. And speaking of social injustices and people who are working in social injustices, we have an amazing guest coming to here. Let's talk about Mr. Bankole Thompson, who is a journalist in the Detroit, Michigan area. He has been working for more than 20 years and has just released his 5th book by the name of Fiery Conscience. He signed our books, and I'm very happy about that. But both of us actually got to sit down and have quite a deep and intrusive talk with him. So that's what you're going to be listening to right now. All right, you are listening to Live from the CRJ. This is our very first inaugural podcast, and I think we struck it very lucky this time around because for our very, very, very first podcast, we have quite a person with us. We are talking to Mr. Bankole Thompson. He is, of course, one of the board. He was one of the members of our board of directors here at CRJ. He is a journalist. He calls, what would you call yourself? Civil rights journalist.
Yes, a national civil rights journalist. Racial equity.
There we go.
Economic inequality. And of course, poverty, democracy, you name it.
There you go. Dean of the Pulse Institute. He's a columnist for Detroit News. Now, keep in mind, in doing my research for this interview, I was like, okay, I only have about 60, 70 cards. He's going to end up filling like all of them up, So
those are too many questions, brother, but let's get it going. Thanks.
Yes.
Listen.
And of course, he is here with his 5th, not 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, but 5th book, Fiery Conscience. And I've read a little bit of it. And we, of course, had a talk earlier, and wow. That's all I can say. It's really, all I can say is wow. So this is Mr. Bankole Thompson. I wish I had long enough arms to reach and press the the applause button, but unfortunately I can't. Hold on. Wait a second. See, there it is. There we go.
Boy.
So, like I said, we have an applause button that probably will not be used regularly on this show, but right. Hey, it's our first show. Who knows?
Look, listen, Brother Lawrence, I'm glad to be here, the home of the Blue Devils. I'm glad to be that you all have asked me to be the inaugural guest for this podcast for the Center for Racial Justice here at Dillard. I think that the center does a great work, great job in not only advocating for racial economic justice issues, but inculcating in the students who are involved with this center the leadership qualities, the interests to prepare them to become effective next generation leaders. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very important, especially in this dispensation that we're in. Some of us call it the Black Lives Matter era movement, or whatever movement you call it. This is a very important dispensation, and it's good to have a center like the Center for Racial Justice here at Dillard under Dr. Ishmael Ashraf's leadership, and all of you who are involved here in terms of advocating for the rights of Black folk and other people, marginalized communities. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if somebody has already told you, but first of all, welcome to New Orleans. Well, welcome back because you've been here.
I've been here many times. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you have been around. Have you gotten jambalaya? I think it's a little bit too warm for. I think it's still a little bit too warm for gumbo.
So
yet.
I was.
It's coming though.
I didn't have jambalaya yet. I'm gonna be here for a couple of days, but I had some oysters yesterday evening. I was at a dinner meeting, so I had some oysters. So I think
brave gentleman.
I think with oysters, I'm fulfilling real Southern hospitality and what it's like. And I still gotta go to Dookie Chase. It's one of my favorite places. Whenever I'm here, I go to Dookie Chase to basically pay homage and have some of that, good soul food.
It's funny that you mentioned Dookie Chase because there are quite a few. The Chase family has a long lineage
Chase,
here in New Orleans. I have personally met Leah. I did meet Leah before she passed. One of the Edgar Chases.
Right.
Because there's so many of them. One of the Edgar Chases I had a chance to speak with because he, if I'm not mistaken, is a Dillard alumni.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the Chase family runs very deep in this city. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for being our very first guest. Yeah. That's always fun. That's always fun to kick things off, and if anything, that's definitely kicking things off right. So, you are a journalist, and this is the funniest thing because again, I was not brought up as a journalist. My area is, of course, writing, my screenwriting, theater, but hopefully, I'm doing well.
Yeah, well, it's.
I'm crossing the fingers. It's like from a journalist, I'm like, I'm the one doing the interviewing this time.
Right. Well, yeah, you're turning the tables upside.
There
Normally, I'm the one interviewing folk, but I feel very strongly about the role of the media. I feel very strongly about the role that we could play in a democracy. Mm-hmm. I feel very strongly in terms of the First Amendment, a constitutional right, and how significant that is for an independent, free press, for us to be a check and balance to government and the status quo. And I believe that the media could do good. I believe that journalists could be resourceful agents of democracy and human rights. I believe that the media, when used effectively in the service of the public good, can be a powerful tool to liberate our communities, liberate our nation. And so what I've sought to do as a journalist and in the space that I'm in is to be able to use my platforms to not only speak truth to power, but also to hold the powerful accountable. Because we have to, Frederick Douglass said that freedom is not given without a demand and never has and never will. And that is such a powerful statement. And I think that this era and in this moment where we are in our democracy, we have to remember those words of Douglass, that freedom is never given without a demand, never has and never will. And it calls upon us as journalists who are concerned about these issues of racial justice, racial equity, economic inequality to basically advance and champion those issues and to open more room in what I call our palace of democracy.
Absolutely. So I have to get to your background and to what essentially brought you to journalism.
Right.
I know for me, I usually go places where I don't see myself. And the reason why I say that, I mean, when I was here, I think this was my, oh goodness, sophomore year, back in the days where dinosaurs walked the planet. And the one thing that I wanted to be was an actor. And I wanted to be an actor. And then one of my peers just came out of nowhere and decided to say, well, because you're of your size, I'm not sure if the listening audience knows or sees a picture, but I'm a rather big guy. Keep in mind, this was 2003, 2004. They did not think that I would be as successful in the role of an actor, I would probably be relegated to playing stereotypical roles or character roles that I wouldn't be essentially successful. So that clicked in my mind of, I guess, and I'm thinking, how many other people feel like this? How many people who may be big, who may be tall, short, who may be Latino, Asian, queer, trans, who else is thinking like this? And I was like, well, if you're not going to give me a job, I'm going to start writing, give myself a job.
Yeah. Well,
and like I said, was there something in your
that sparked my interest?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting you said that, because I have always felt I've always loved writing. I've always been very expressive, and I've found writing to be a niche, and because I've always loved reading, I've always been exposed to a litany of books. And I remember a long time ago, my late godfather, George Haley, the brother of the author of Roots, Alex Haley, always talked about the power of black writers and how black writers can change and shape history, can shape civilization, but also how black writers can rescue black humanity, the achievements and the greatness of black humanity from the clutches of obscurity. By that I mean how, as black writers, as black journalists, we can talk about the history of our communities. We can talk about the significance of our communities and the achievements of those in our community who have made who have done great things, and be able to tell it in a way that our white counterparts cannot, because they don't come from that background of race and class experience for the most part. So I've always found writing to be a liberating tool, to use it as a vehicle to tell the story of black humanity, and by extension tell the story of our collective humanity as individuals. Exactly. And that space, I think, is so important, because if we don't tell our story, and I hear this all the time, it may sound like a cliche, if we don't tell our story, then no one else would tell our story. And I think it is incumbent on us as black writers and black journalists and storytellers, opinion shapers, to be able to do that. I'm going to share a quick story. Back in 2003, I was in Washington, D.C., and my godfather, George Haley, invited me to come with him as his guest at a reception that Jet magazine had for the late Simeon Booker. Simeon Booker was the first black reporter for the Washington Post. Simeon Booker was the Washington bureau chief for Jet magazine for 50 years, and this was the 50th year, the golden jubilee of Jet Simeon Booker serving as the Washington bureau chief. So I went to this reception with George Haley. He and Simeon Booker are old friends and so forth, and both of them are now ancestors. And I went to this reception and met a lot of black luminaries. And being in there, this was Jet Ebony magazine, but it dawned on me that I was in a room that honored and recognized the trailblazing impact of the late Leron Bennett, who was the editor of Ebony magazine and wrote the book America Before the Mayflower, one of the black intellectual media giants during the civil rights movement. Why am I saying this? Because that collective of black writers, black journalists, black thinkers, and some may call it the black intelligentsia, have an important role in our democracy, have an important role in championing racial justice. So the work that I do, and in being able to use my pen as an opinion columnist and being able to speak to issues as Dean of the Pulse Institute and so many other things. And now, of course, I was named to the National Board of Directors of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, which is the civil rights organization that was founded by Dr. King, and which led the civil rights movement. I was nominated to the national board by Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who's a national civil rights leader, one of Dr. King's top lieutenants. Dr. Lafayette has been a mentor of mine for almost 2 decades. So my point is that we, in the space that I'm in, I feel very strongly about the role that we have to play as journalists, as writers, with the pen and the voice to speak truth to power.
Exactly. And since you wanted to kick off the media, let's go ahead and kick off the media.
Right.
Because in recent years, especially with the advent of the previous administration, it seems as though media, especially media that is focused on people of color and various different minorities in the country, have kind of been under attack. I mean, media in general. Former President Trump was not a fan of clearly certain medias, and he was very vocal about that. The one thing that pops into my mind is CNN's Jim Acosta, who he revoked his press pass because he simply didn't like being questioned. And that's not something that I have ever seen before. And right. I may not be old, but right. I've definitely been on the earth for a little bit of a while, to know that, okay, that just seems weird. That doesn't seem like it's something that would happen in this space. So can you talk to me a little bit about if you have felt like essentially under attack just because of your place as a journalist, and notably as a journalist of color,
right,
who is in like racial
in the trenches of racial justice.
Yes, exactly.
I do, Brother Lawrence, because in fact, my book, Fiery Conscience, the first chapter in the book is titled Putting White Supremacy on Trial. Mm-hmm. And the chapter is written by Len Niehoff, who's a nationally known First Amendment lawyer. And he was a lawyer that the Detroit News hired, where I am an opinion columnist. The Detroit News hired him, the late publisher John Wallman, hired Len Niehoff and another lawyer called Jim Stewart. And both of them were my lawyers who defended me in 2016 in a lawsuit that was brought against me by a prominent white nationalist out of Tennessee called James Edwards, who hangs out with David Duke, the former Grand Wizard. So when you talk about have I felt the weight, of course, I'm a frontline journalist, and James Edwards, who has a racist show called The Political Cesspool, has interviewed David Duke and others. And he had filed a lawsuit against me and the Detroit News in 2016 for me writing a column about the KKK and Donald Trump and him. And this was in 2016. And they filed this lawsuit, a libel lawsuit, accusing me of libel and so forth. And, the Detroit News, the lawyers who represented me defended the case vigorously. And it took about 18 months, I think, and the lawsuit was filed on the day of my birthday. Yes.
Fun.
Yeah, which, of course, not only fun, but it tells you how creepy these guys are. Mm-hmm. And of course, as a frontline journalist, as a frontline writer, and a thinker of the Black experience, suddenly it comes with the territory, right? So I wasn't much surprised. But to cut a long story short, they filed a lawsuit against me on the day of my birthday. I was in Washington, D.C. for a function. I got a call from the Detroit News that these guys are going to court. But anyway, and when they filed this lawsuit, I saw this white nationalist online raising money, help us defeat Bankole Thompson in Detroit. He's this and that. These guys are very organized. So, but anyway, after 18 months, and this was because of a column I wrote about Donald Trump, the KKK, and of course. And so after 18 months, the Michigan Court of Appeals, the second highest court in Michigan, a 3-judge panel ruled unanimously saying that my columns are protected political speech under the First Amendment. And of course, my lawyers using the New York Times versus Sullivan, the notable case on libel, successfully defended me, and the Court of Appeals not only ruled in my favor, but they made it a published opinion. Published opinion means that that lawsuit, that case, would now be cited from now on whenever there is a case involving libel and the First Amendment. And so it became a published opinion. I think less than 5% of cases are published opinion, means it's a precedent-setting case. So to answer your question, have I felt the weight of being, in this?
I think you did.
Yes, I have. and I think that not many, I'm in a space where it's kind of amazing, though, because somebody said to me, well, not many journalists get sued by white nationalists and folks who are linked to the KKK.
That's, well, my goodness. And I was just asking.
But that does not, that should not deter us. We have to keep fighting and championing racial justice.
And here is the thing, and I feel like maybe yesterday or day before yesterday, somebody was talking about noted inequities when it comes to the media. According to the Pew Research Center, I forgot to write it down on my notes, but I still remember it. 43% of people believe that the news media unfairly stereotypes Black people. And when I think about it, I see some of the previous things of the, my goodness, almost 10 years of the Black Lives Matter movement, because it was around this time that Trayvon Martin was killed, and it just kind of started this back up again. But I just see inequities like the fact that if you are going to some place, they'll do their best to sort of humanize the white victim. Like he played tennis and he had a very light up smile, even though he killed 17 people. And of course, when dealing with somebody who is Black when it's killed, he was no angel. He was he did this and he made an F on his social studies test. You know what I mean? No, I think that's a valid point. Pew Research Center does a lot of studies, across many issues. And I think the report about the media stereotyping Black folk, I mean, that's, frankly, I think anybody knows that. It's good to see Pew Research Center highlights it, but I think the Black folk will tell you, well, we don't even need Pew Research to tell us that. We know that. Just look at how when people are accused of criminal behavior, sometimes there's a propensity in the mainstream media, because I'm in the mainstream media. Prior to the Detroit News, I was the editor of the African American newspaper in Michigan called the Michigan Chronicle for a decade. But my point here is there's a propensity for the mainstream media to humanize white assailants, and there's a propensity for the mainstream media to criminalize Black folk who are accused and make them feel guilty. And of course, another example I'm thinking of is Kyle Rittenhouse.
Totally. And in Wisconsin, right? And that's a great example. But not only that, I mean, I remember when the shooting in Aurora, in Denver, happened. The young white student, or I call him a madman, who went to the movie theater in Aurora and started shooting people. There were articles. I read a couple of opinion articles in the Denver Post saying how he was a great kid and, was going to be a neuroscientist of some sort. So my point is there that we should condemn all evil. We should condemn violence, no matter who the accused is. But what's the point when white folk are accused of the same crime that black people are accused of, those white folk who are accused, they tell us about their history and how great they were and how just what happened to them may have been a slip, but they're basically good people. But when it's black people, they're not humanized, and there is no such thing as due process. They're treated as if they're guilty in the press. And so that's the imbalance. And I think that's the racial inequity that we see in the mainstream media, how the media views criminal behavior by human beings based on the color of their skin. If you have to feel that you have to tell the totality of the story of a white person who has been accused of doing something horrible, but you have to tell their entire story and tell us where they went to school and what grades they got, but you don't do the same for their black counterparts, clearly that shows a bias irrespective of the violence that both of them or each of them may have committed. And so there is bias in the media. And I think we have to be able to call it out. Now, how we cure that, I think, has to do with inclusion, diversity, meaningful inclusion and diversity in newsrooms across this nation. Who does the media hire? What kinds of journalists are hired? And who is being assigned to cover black communities?
Exactly. You keep running over the things that I actually was going to ask.
Well,
it's like it's a flow.
Right.
It's a flow. If you had, let's say, a magic wand, and you could just tap it and say, and have various things that are in the media space, what were some things that you would like to see in today's media space?
Well, one of the things that I like to see is more emphasis and resources devoted to the area of economic justice.
Okay.
Media newsrooms across this nation have, enterprise projects, and those projects may focus on covering, the sex scandals in the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Those projects may involve covering certain issues within certain industry that they care about. Corporate, scandals in corporations and so forth. But I think I'd like to see an enterprise project devoted towards economic inequality and showing how black communities are dealing with the inequality that we see across this nation. And by that I mean poverty, right? And the importance of that, but also showing the faces of that and what is being done to help black communities recover from the manacles of inequality. So if you were to ask me what I think the media should do, I think they should do that. There ought to be emphasis. There ought to be a focus on certain issues that have a meaningful impact in advancing the black community. The reason why I think a lot of black folk or some black folk write of the media, they say, well, the mainstream media is biased anyway. They don't come to our communities unless a young brother who's 17 years old shoots somebody, or there's a carjacking at the gas station. And that's the time that they come to a neighborhood and cover that neighborhood and talk about the carjacking and the shooting, all of which are important, gun violence and all of that. But beyond those, what about the economic issues? What about those economic challenges faced by those very communities that, become sometimes, the breeding ground for gun violence?
Okay, so let's kind of move towards, because speaking of targets on our backs, let's move into a little bit of the 2024 election, because that's coming. I know here in Louisiana we're dealing with a governor's race, which the Center for Racial Justice, of course, is going to be covering on Monday. We're having a debate here
among the candidates.
Yes, I do believe we have about 5 candidates. I'm not sure how if anybody else is confirmed as of this recording, but we'll definitely go ahead and find out later. So in recent times, we've seen sort of, I guess, a backlash toward, I guess, an answer toward the Black Lives Matter movement in the ways of co-opting yet another part of AAVE, which is the anti-wokeness movement.
Right.
A lot of candidates have a tendency to utilize woke as a pejorative, just to mean anything that they don't like, which may be black or queer or trans. So how do you feel that is going to directly affect the voting bloc on either side when it comes to this upcoming election?
Well, so I think this is what the political right has done. They have succeeded in framing a narrative around being social justice conscious, being racially conscious, and also being diversity conscious. And I think anybody who speaks the language of social justice, economic justice, racial justice is considered, a woke individual, if you will, whatever they call it. But I remember somewhere along the line, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Mm-hmm. He talks about the need for us to stay awoke during this period of great revolution. And so if you're saying that we are woke activists, then Dr. King was the greatest woke activist, especially when he advised that we must stay awake during this period of great revolution. So I think the nation is going through a lot of hardship. And those of us who believe in championing racial justice, economic justice, certainly should not be deterred by the labels that are being pushed out there. I think that, those who are on the other side of the political ledger, and conservatives have done a great job in terms of the right has done a great job in terms of framing this, but I don't think liberals and the Democratic coalition have done a great job of reframing the narrative. And I think sometimes what we end up seeing is that those who are on the other side of the political ledger or the ideological spectrum have this tendency to run away once the right succeeds in framing an issue that is pro-black, an issue that is at the center of black existence and black survival. Because if we go by history, this notion of being a woke activist is there's nothing wrong in staying awake during this period of great revolution, as Dr. King said. And so I don't see any reason why that is a bad thing, except for those who are not students of history and who don't understand how far this nation has come. So even as, we go into an important chapter, of course, next year's 2024 presidential election, I think black folk ought to demand from politicians who say they want black support that you have to tell us where you stand on these issues of racial justice. You have to tell us where you stand on the issue of criminal justice reform. You have to tell us where you stand on issues of poverty. You have to tell us where you stand on issues of critical race theory, and not give in to the fear mongering that is being created around critical race theory, around other issues, and is done in a way to make folk abdicate the battlefield for racial justice. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna say something short. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I gave a eulogy at the funeral of a sharecropper from Dillard County in South Carolina, and I talked about this black woman. I was asked to give the public eulogy at her funeral, and I talked about how the real founding mothers have been the black women, and who have toiled on those slave plantation fields and so forth, and that their lives defined the meaning of critical race theory, the struggles of injustice, the chains of brutality, the scourge of the whip. Those speak to the enduring reality of critical race theory. And it is out of all those struggles, out of all those pains, that this, the arguing for some sort of a legal mechanism that deals with racism comes out of. Mm-hmm. So, the idea that when black folk want to advocate for racial justice, advocate for diversity and inclusion in universities and colleges, especially after the Supreme Court ruled adversely against affirmative action, which I thought was an ill-conceived decision, the worst of its kind. I don't see why people should run away from those who are calling people who are championing, others who are championing racial justice, woke activists. I don't see it.
And so here's my question. Do you think any of the candidates would, especially candidates who are for or believe they're for racial justice and championing, showing racial inequity, do you feel that it would behoove them to not shy away from these issues? I mean, because again, as of right now, amongst many certain spaces, there are situations where you're like, woke is the boogeyman. Woke is the scary monster in the closet. CRT is half the time people don't know what critical race, half the time they don't know what woke and critical race theory is. However, it's scary. It sounds scary. And do you think it would behoove people to lean into that, saying, okay, this is what it is. Yeah. This is what woke is. This is not something to be fearful of. This is something that we need to essentially embrace because it's not scary unless you are racist.
Well, yes, they're scapegoating it and they're blaming, the entire body of advocacy, entire body of engagement for racial justice as simply something that is an anathema to the ideals of democracy, when it's actually is the opposite. It's mutually exclusive, should be mutually exclusive. So I think those who are running for office, we ought to demand not only in the media space, but in the public space, in the public gallery, we ought to demand that they tell us where they stand on these issues of racial justice, economic equality. As I, prepare to go back to Michigan next week, I'm going to be speaking to a bar association, an association of lawyers, and they've asked me to come and speak, be the 2023 speaker for the annual dinner, and it's on affirmative action. Mm-hmm. And so my point here is we ought to demand of these candidates, of these people who are interested in black support to tell us where they stand on these issues. And, Dr. King said the measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands in moments of controversy. And so if folk are not willing, if politicians, be they black, white, brown, green, if they're not willing to embrace the pain of black humanity publicly, why should they get the support from the black community?
And I definitely agree with that.
If you can't publicly embrace black humanity and the pain of black humanity, why must black people trust that when you get into office, you'll really do something when you cannot publicly acknowledge, publicly accept the fact that black humanity is part of the enduring experience of our democratic experiment?
Okay. And that actually moves to what we're currently dealing in the political space.
Right.
As of our recording, we're still essentially dealing with we're still essentially dealing with this sort of turmoil that's going on in Congress right now.
No speaker.
And
Kevin
of course,
McCarthy mess.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a hot mess.
It's just kind of this weird sort of infighting situation, and it's very wild to see it play out. Do you think
I'd like to see Hakeem Jeffries, brother Hakeem from New York, be the speaker?
I would look forward to that too, but I'm going to leave that alone. That's my personal opinion. I'm going to leave it be.
Right. But no, I understand the institution is apolitical, but this is my opinion, though. I think if Hakeem becomes speaker, they'll say, "Oh, there goes the woke activist as one." But listen, what is happening in Congress, I think, is shameful. It's awful. And it really undermines one of the significant institutions of our democratic system. Mm-hmm. Congress is the heartbeat of our democracy because it's the people's house, And I think that to have no speaker at this point in time certainly is unfortunate, and it just prolongs the problem. It prolongs the effort to solve all of the intractable issues that we're dealing with.
Do you feel that is going to eventually have real world repercussions on us who are just living our lives and on the notion of racial injustice?
Well, it is, because you got to be able to pass certain things in the House to make it to the, to the Senate, and then they'll vote, or the Senate votes on an issue. It has to come back to the House. There has to be a corresponding vote and all of that. So it's going to impact. I think we are almost at a... It's at the crossroads. So nothing has been done. Everything is at a standstill right now. So everything hinges on what comes out of the House.
Of course. Let's talk about Fiery Conscience. So this is your fifth book, not first, second, third, or fourth. Yeah. You're not in the state of flux like I am. Right. This is your fifth book. So I want to ask, what led you into saying, okay, was it a thing of, I want to write a fifth book?
Right.
Did you feel like, okay, this was the next thing to come up? What was your mindset in creating that
in this book? Yes. Yeah. So Fiery Conscience, several people approached me right after George Floyd about coming out with a book that speaks to what happened with George Floyd. And, because I've been in this racial justice track in the media for so long, mm-hmm. and to give my perspective. And I remember when the George Floyd verdict came down, I wrote the front page column for the Detroit News when that verdict came down, which, was the whole world was waiting for the verdict in Minneapolis. But people approached me, asked me to write a book around George Floyd and racial justice and so forth. And I wanted to do a book, but I wanted to do a book differently. So because I've written 4 books before, including 2 on President Barack Obama, mm-hmm. because I've interviewed him many times, sat down with him several times. And I wanted to do a book, but one that will be different. Will speak to the essence of the movement that basically... the movement that speaks to what happened to George Floyd, and George Floyd speaking to that movement and all of that, but to write it differently, and that was to basically encapsulate the decades of my journalism and of course being a practicing journalist, and to reflect on some of the seminal moments in my media career. And basically that became the essence of the book. So when you look at the book, it's 12 chapters. And each 12th chapter is 12 analytical essays written by 12 different individuals who have observed my work over the years. And I think I shared it in my lecture earlier at the Carney Hall today. And people who have observed my work over the years and talking about it in their own voice, and how I have lent my voice and my pen to advance in racial justice. And of course, I shared the story of the 2 young African-American boys, who were falsely accused of killing a white woman. And I intervened in that case years ago in 2006 and was successfully able to get them released, and all the charges were dropped. So when you read Fiery Conscience, it's a collection of stories that speak to Black humanity, but to our collective humanity. And those stories, the anchor point here is my involvement in those stories and how I've lent my voice to those issues that are raised in those stories.
Exactly.
And they're being shared by individuals who were impacted by that story or who have observed how those stories have evolved.
Okay. Now,
So it's not me philosophizing my views of the world, my take on democracy and so forth and so forth.
now, how do you feel how do you feel this book is different than your other 5 works?
Yeah, because my other 5, this is the 5th one. My other 4 books have been me speaking. It's me writing. Me talking about my take. Like when I wrote the book in 2010 on President Barack Obama, it was titled Obama and Black Loyalty, and I was exploring this notion about President Barack Obama's loyalty to Black folk when he became president, and what does that mean across issues like prison reform, criminal justice reform, economic inequality, and so forth. And then in 2011, when I wrote the book Obama and Christian Loyalty, it was about Barack Obama, his faith posture, Black theology, and the religious right. Because there was a time when Reverend Franklin Graham, I remember, came out on Easter Sunday to raise questions about President Barack Obama's Christian faith beliefs, and basically intimated that he doesn't know if President Obama is a Christian practicing or Bible practicing Christian, whatever it is, and so the book Obama and Christian Loyalty talks about the politics of the religious right, Black theology. Of course, I cited the late James Cone from Union Theological Seminary in that book, and talk about just the essence of that and Obama's faith posture. So my previous books, it's been me talking, and me giving my take. In fact, in 2005, 2006, when my first book came out, it was titled Ignoring the Underprivileged. And it was titled Ignoring the Underprivileged, an indictment of mainstream media. So it was me being in the media. Of course, I was in the Black press at the time, talking about how the mainstream media ignores Black issues of racial justice and so forth. And I remember the book was then used for required reading at Eastern Michigan University by then Professor Charles Simmons. But I say that to say that, so this was my take on the mainstream media in 2006. In fact, I cited Hurricane Katrina because Katrina had just happened in 2005.
Yes.
I talked about Katrina in the book and how the media was covering Black folk who were trying to escape Katrina, and we saw them, swimming in the waters, and they call them looters. And then when it was white folk in the waters looking to, escape, they call them something else. The point is, though, that when it comes to the media, they look at Black people, and we are interpreted. Our actions are interpreted differently than our white counterparts. And so Ignoring the Privileged, back then in 2006, talked about how the media can be biased towards Black communities. So, but this book is my first book where other folk are looking at my work through their own lens and through their own voice, and the issues that I've championed.
And even in that, as somebody who survived Hurricane Katrina,
Right.
I would say fortunate not to be here when the storm hit.
Yeah.
But I was always afraid for years. I was afraid of the Katrina sigh, and the reason why it was that it's that mainstream media is so powerful that I've been so many places, thankfully, and anytime for maybe like from 2005 to maybe like 2007, I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. And anytime that I told somebody I'm from New Orleans, and this is myself calling it the Katrina sigh, because anytime somebody heard I was from New Orleans, they let out a Oh, really? How is it down there? I got it 2 or 3 years ago. And it was like, ma'am, Hurricane Katrina happened over like 50 years ago. What's going on with you?
That's right.
But it's this sort of mindset that they're like, I literally had somebody who I had to, unfortunately, a former boss who I had to call out because she was essentially telling me that me being hired by her was her helping the recovery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, hold up, let's go ahead and pull it back. And you're speaking in Kearney about white liberals don't like being called racist, and she's very white liberal. And I wanted to say, ma'am, I understand how you feel, and I understand it's not coming from a malicious place, but what you're doing is inappropriate. Can you please not do that anymore? And she was like, I didn't even see it like that.
Yeah.
Now, here is a question for you. Now, it seems as though, and I'm not trying to call you out, I'm not trying to call any ages here. You have been in the media space for quite a bit of time, at the very least, maybe I would say 20 years. You have had an ability to see how media has essentially changed from where it was in the mid 2000s to now in 2023, where if you have a phone, any clip that you have, you can possibly be a reporter. So, and like I said, there are several smaller and I would say less reputable outlets. May they be blogs or on social media. If you can give them a little bit of advice to keep sort of a level of integrity, what would it be?
Well, so this is very interesting you said that, because your question speaks to the changing landscape in the media. I call it the rise of citizen journalist. And that is something that I addressed in that book back in 2006. Bloggers and those who have taken onto the internet, the internet has become democracy's perhaps biggest tool, if you will. It has democratized the way the media operates. And we've seen what I call the shift in political sands, or the shift in media sands here, in terms of just how citizen journalists, people who are bloggers and who take to the internet, who create their own online newsletters, have tried to put the media in check. So when stories are, when there's breaking story by the local networks here in New Orleans, or the national networks and so forth, what we see is they are rushing to break the story because somebody on Facebook going to put that story out there. Mm-hmm. Somebody driving, from Gentilly Boulevard or right away from campus here, that we're on Dillard campus. Somebody driving around this campus, sees a police officer, pulls over a black driver across from Dillard and engages in behavior that is constitutionally questionable, may have that video on tape. And by the time the local news runs over there, they put it on Facebook, it garners thousands of views.
Exactly.
Or Instagram, or X, formerly Twitter, or even LinkedIn and so forth. So I think that...
it's just me, but I will never call it X.
I know. Listen. Elon Musk is a whole different conversation. We're not going to do that on this inaugural podcast conversation.
Yeah. We're trying not to be too controversial.
Yeah. Well, I don't mind being controversial, but I ain't feeling Elon Musk right now. But the thing about what I'm trying to say, though, is that there's an opportunity for those who are engaged in what I call citizen journalism. What I'd like to see, what you put out there, put out the raw truth. Put out what you see. There is no need to sugarcoat it. There is no need to embellish it, and you can tell your own story. I always encourage people to tell their own story, and I think since I've been in New Orleans this week, I've been having several meetings, talking to different people. I had a brief meeting earlier today with Dave Dennis, one of our civil rights leaders here in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And but I always encourage people to tell their story. And you don't have to wait for a local or national network to tell your story. You can tell your own story. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that social media has created. Now, I understand that may be a drawback for the organized media and so forth, but people have to tell their own story. And we're in an age and in a dispensation where you don't have to wait for the network to show up knocking on your door, or you don't have to send in a letter of request for some news editor to decide whether they want to cover Lawrence or not. Lawrence can tell his own story with a podcast, by going on social media and so forth. So I'll say what you tell, whatever you do, give us the real deal. Tell us the real story, and that speaks to the human experience.
And there's so many out there. There is this one young man on the newest social media world, TikTok. His name is JJ, and he has a tendency to sort of break down or debunk various like bad faith arguments and stereotypes. And he's a sophomore in college, and he's been doing it since he was 17. And I'm like, where was all of this when I was 17?
Well, I mean, but all of this is the advantage, is the opportunity that we are presented with in a technological age. All of this is the opportunity that we're presented with in a radically a different environment. And suddenly, we're going to have to deal with the implications of AI, artificial intelligence later. That's a whole different conversation. But for now, what we see is, I think, from TikTok to Instagram to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all these other avenues, social media platforms, it speaks to the opportunities that are presented in this technological age. And we have to, ask ourselves, how do we use these platforms to advance the public good? Mm-hmm. How do we use these platforms to speak to the essence of our collective humanity and to the essence of Black humanity? And how do we create opportunities out of these platforms to ensure that the public good is protected? And I think that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. And young people in this age are very fortunate. I think all of us are fortunate. And I shared this, I said something similar, shared the story last year when I gave the keynote lecture for Brown University Black History Month. And I was being asked during the Q&A session for Brown University, I was being asked about, today's generation versus the civil rights leadership, civil rights era. But one of the things that I said was, during the civil rights movement, Dr. King, Dr. Bernard Lafayette, the late Congressman John Lewis, Ambassador Andrew Young, and others, they did not have, Diane Nash and others, they didn't have smartphones, right? Some of us are walking around with two phones. There was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there were no Twitter, LinkedIn, and so forth. But they use their creative intelligence. They use their own intellect to be innovative and to find ways to advance the cause of racial equity and racial justice. And in doing so, they did it effectively. So in this age and in this space where, we can talk to somebody, in a whole different continent just by texting, and there's so many opportunities that are at our fingertips that I think we can use those opportunities collectively to advance the public good.
Absolutely. If there was something that you would like to leave our audience with, who hopefully are a whole bunch of students, if you're listening, Listen more. Like, I know it's the first episode, but there's more stuff to come. Listen more. We got some fun stuff for you. But if you could leave our students, our Dillard students, with one thing, especially those who are in the social justice space, those who are in the mass communication space, who may want to move into this area, because mass communications is mass communications. You can go quite literally anywhere. What would you want to leave them with, as that kind of last thing?
Well, so let me premise it this way. Dillard University is a great institution. It is a citadel of black education, black empowerment. It's an important institution that remains as a vanguard to advance black humanity. The students that walk to the campus of Dillard, I expect, are going to be leaders in their own different ways and in their own spaces. And if mass communication is one of the disciplines that you choose to be in when you step into Dillard and ready to step out of Dillard, understand that communication is important, and that the great leaders in history that we remember were great communicators. Sometimes, or in most of the time, you can be a successful and an effective leader if you're not an effective communicator. Dr. King is championed as one of the greatest civil rights leaders of the 20th century because Dr. King was a masterful communicator. He understood how to use communication skills. The late John Lewis was a communicator. The late Harry Belafonte was a communicator. Diane Nash, Dr. Benalla, these individuals know how to communicate. Communication is a necessity. It's something that is important, and it is a space that is needed today. We need more black folk as communicators who can go into that discipline. One of the reasons why we remember Frederick Douglass so well, the 19th century black abolitionist, because Frederick Douglass was a genius, was a master communicator. He used photography to communicate. He was once considered the most photographed individual, if not of the 19th century, because he understood the essence of communicating. When we think about the late Bishop Richard Allen, of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, another founder of perhaps the AME Church, was the first black institution ever founded in this nation. Richard Allen would create newsletters to communicate to his community and to speak to his people. What am I trying to say in invoking these histrionic and historical authorities? I'm simply saying to the students of Dillard that communication is a very powerful tool, that if you choose the route of using communication as that discipline to advance whatever you want to do, understand that in fact, that generations before you have used communication and the communicating tool as an avenue to protect, to safeguard, and to advance the interests of black humanity. And in so doing, they were able to advance the interests of our collective humanity.
Bankole Thompson, I think this was an amazing first episode. I hope that I'm again, nobody's journalist, but I hope at least I was able to catch your attention for an extended period of time. Now, well, I do have to ask, should I go get one of those pairs of like giant Oprah glasses? Am I at that level yet? I don't think. I think you did a great job with this interview, Brother Lawrence. I think your questions were very inquisitive driven, and I think they were penetrating, speaking to some of the issues that we're all concerned about. So thank you again, and of course to the Center for Racial Justice for the honor of being your inaugural interview guest here on this podcast. A pleasure. It has definitely been. I mean, not only for this, but the other, even just driving up and grabbing the books. It's been a general pleasure. Okay, it seems that was wonderful. So, thank you for listening to our episode of the Center for Racial Justice. Wait a second.
Live from the Center for Racial Justice.
Yeah. But the reason why Tia is looking at me like that is because I completely totally forgot that she also had some questions too. So
yeah, I wanted to get my questions in.
So I'm looking down at her feet just to make sure she doesn't yank off one of the shoes and throws it at me. It's like I'm have like chancla flashbacks from when I was a kid. So I absolutely want you to listen to the questions that Tia had for Bankole because they were really interesting. So let's go ahead and look at that right now.
Okay, so from your book, Fiery Conscience,
Right.
What advice would you give to a young activist trying to take action and find solutions in all the injustices we have going on?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was asked a similar question about that last year when I was speaking for Brown University Black History Month about young activists and what we can do. And the advice here is be original. Be who you are. Because I don't think that we're asking people to be the next Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
We're not asking you to be the next Shirley Chisholm. What we're asking is that you be who you are and use your gifts and your talents and use them in the best way possible to be an effective social change agent. But in doing so as well, I think it is important that we read history. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to be conscious of the fact that people are going to test you as an activist. They want to know how much you know. They want to know the extent of your intellect. They want to know the extent of your commitment. They want to know how courageous you are. And they want to know if, in fact, if they place you in a room, are you just going to let steam and just break down? And by that, I mean that sometimes activism is important. It's at the very core of our struggle to, defend Black humanity, and it's always going to be important. But I think we should also be mindful of the fact that there are folk who are going to challenge activists to see what they are made of. Mm-hmm. And so my advice would be that we read history, understand those who came before this era, and the strategies that they employed. Now, over time, between the 50s and the 2020s, it's a long time, almost half a century. The strategies that were used back then may not be effective today. It's a different era, it's a different time. There's the era of Instagram, Facebook, X, you name it, and all of that. But it's always important for us to read history so we know what strategies were employed by those who paved the way for all of us to be here. And I think that is very important. And I'm going to share this quickly since you asked me this question. Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who was one of Dr. King's top lieutenants and a good friend and mentor of mine, always shares the story about, back in the 50s and the 60s. And, when they would be asked to go into a meeting, he said sometimes they would come up with hypothetical questions and they'll create a scenario and say, well, we got a call from the governor of Louisiana and he's been asking for a meeting, or the mayor of New Orleans, and she wants to meet with us. Who wants to go? And they said, and Dr. Lafayette said, what they've always done is to study and see who are the people who are just going to raise their hands up. And normally they're the last people they will invite to ask to go. They will choose those who say, wait, let's think about this invitation. Why does the governor want to speak to us today? Why
does the mayor want to talk to us all of a sudden after we've tried to reach out to the mayor? So those who apply analytical thinking and those who are very strategic in their thinking are the ones who are normally in the room. So activists have to be strategic, they have to be analytical, and they have to understand that there are moments that call for us to be able to speak to those issues directly, and there are moments when you want to go in and listen and see what people have to say before you come back with a response.
Okay. Definitely. And I'm just visiting, like I told you earlier,
Right.
I went to visit the Ben Franklin Middle School, and hearing when I asked the kids about social justice and what it means to them, and when I asked them what activists are they aware of course they all know Martin Luther King, they all know,
Right.
but I did find it hard for them to name current activists and, you know, finding out people who they can relate to now that are
Right.
fighting for our rights, for equality.
Right.
But I did think it was so interesting hearing 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who know about the environmental crisis we're having right now with the saltwater intrusion, and
Right.
hearing about the wildfires, and they all named racism, gun violence. So our youth are very much aware.
Right.
They're just really missing that confidence in knowing that their voices will be heard,
Yeah.
and having a game plan for solutions.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that has to be done is to be able to build their confidence, and to tell them that, you know, they're in fact the next generation that we're counting on to take the mantle of leadership. They're the ones who are going to be the solution changers. They're the ones who are going to be the change makers, and the future is in their hands. And I think part of the problem, though, is, you know, we always have this debate between the generation during the civil rights movement and our generation, right? The disconnect, you know, has the mantle of leadership been passed over to us, or do we have to grab the mantle and run with it? You know, and then of course there's also the debate about, well, we're not sure, Bankole, about whether, you know, Tia is ready to take over. We're not sure if Lawrence is ready. We're not sure even if Bankole is ready, you know, and there's that back and forth. But, you know, I think that no one is ever ready to be in a leadership position. As sometimes, you know, Shakespeare said, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And so you may not be born great. You may achieve greatness, leadership qualities, or you may have leadership qualities thrust upon you. So wherever you fall in that column, I think we have to project young people as leaders. And I think sometimes we've done a very bad job of not putting young people in certain positions of influence and power, especially young people that we know are committed, have a commitment, they have courage, they're brilliant, they're intelligent, they're strategic, and they're talented. And we have to be able to do that. I think we can't just go into a room and be talking down on young people. We should be able to go into a room and talk with young people, right, and listen to what they have to say. And I think that's the reason why sometimes you find young people who feel a disconnect between them and sometimes the leaders that we have, because the attitude, the way you even approach young people, you know, and I don't think that, you know, when, you know, I've been in rooms where folk come up to you and the first thing they want to size up is how old you are. How old you are has nothing to do with you being in the room.
Yes.
The fact that you are in the room says that you have something to contribute, right, to the discussion in the room. So when you walk up to me and say, well, how old are you? It doesn't matter how old I am. The fact that I'm in the room, let's have a conversation about what is happening in the Black community. But when I walk into the room and I walk up to you right away and say, hey, Tia, how old? You know, what am I trying to say? So that basically means that I have looked away from your talent. I have ignored whatever your contributions are that got you in the room, you know, and I'm only focused on your age. So I think sometimes that has a dangerous and a corrosive impact on young people, and it allows them to feel turned off and not even want to be engaged.
Right. I definitely agree. We have to include the young voices and the problems that's going on, because they know. They, like I learned today, they're very much aware. They're very much interested in what's going on, but it's the idea of what can I do? I'm in 7th grade.
Right.
So 8th grade. So it's like they're definitely capable of participating in any movement. And I told them that when I met them today, like, our voices matter, your voices matter, our youth are our future leaders, for sure.
Yeah. And that has to be that has to be a continuum. That has to be a continual conversation. The problem we have, and I see this all the time, is that we have conversation about youth leadership once every 5 million years, once every 20 years. We have the big conversation and there are no young people. I've been in meetings where people go into a room and then they say they're having a big meeting about solving all the problems of the world. And you walk in, there's no young person in the room.
Right. Yeah.
You walk in the room, there's nobody there who's on Instagram.
Yes.
Now, how are you going to get the message out?
I've been to a few meetings like that.
You walk in there, there's nobody who's on LinkedIn. Or if they've been on LinkedIn, the last time they checked their LinkedIn was 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just on my LinkedIn. I just posted a picture giving you guys a shout out on LinkedIn. So the point is that how are you going to conduct business talking about the future of Black America, the future of urban America, the future of Detroit, the future of New Orleans, the future of Jackson, Mississippi, the future of Chicago, the future of Atlanta, the future of Washington, D.C. And there ain't no young person in that room that you're talking about the future.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem. And that creates a major disconnect. And so when other folk are saying, well, Bankole, we're not sure if they're ready to take over. Well, of course you're not sure if they're ready to take over because you've been having conversation without them anyway. Mm-hmm. And you've not shown them the ropes.
And we have to prepare them.
Right.
And give that attention. That's
right. And I think that's part of the problem. But, I'm an eternal optimist. I'm very hopeful. I tend to develop a very optimistic view of the world. Even, in the darkest hours of our democracy, of course, the things that are unraveling now, I still hold to an optimistic view that there's still hope, and with that hope, I think we can, in the words of Dr. King, we can carve out hope, out of a mountain. Of stone, and we can do a lot. And there's an era with so much opportunity, the rise of social media, the internet, and all of that. I think it affords a lot of young people, all of us, the opportunity to really advance the cause of justice and to advance the work that we're doing collectively and individually in our own spaces.
Okay, and then for my next question.
Yes.
2 decades of the impactful journalism of Bankole Thompson.
Now, this is this is an inquisition, but go ahead, I'm listening.
So with 2 decades of journalism,
right,
what has changed in our community and what your writings about? What do you see from 20 years ago? What is the major change that you've seen happen in our community? Positive and negative side.
So before, it's funny you asked that question because, and I'm reflecting on it, right? So before I gave the talk earlier about the book with the students, and I was sitting at a lunch table with one of the students, and a couple of students actually. So one of them who was sitting next to me, I think his last name is Gibson. But anyway, he and I were talking and talking about my book. So back in 2005, 2006, I wrote my first book, and he said that was the year I was born. And I said, don't say that. That makes me feel like I've been around forever since civilization began. I said 2005, 2006 to 2023 is a long time. A lot has changed. I
was 6. So
are you serious?
Yeah, I was 6 years old. So I can't say I was fully informed.
Wow, don't say it again. You make me feel as if I've been around forever. I'm just as young as you.
If it makes anybody feel any sort of thing, I was 21.
Are you serious? Oh God. So guys, okay. But anyway, youth is in attitude, not age.
Yes.
No, but so what has changed 20 years ago? I think a lot has changed in terms of just how the media has evolved. I think social media, the internet, and people's ability to not wait on a local network to come and tell their story, to not wait on the mainstream media to decide whether they want to come and cover the activities of the Center for Racial Justice here at Dillard, just by tweeting, by posting something on social media, you can get your message out. I think with that, a lot has changed in that we've seen the rise of citizen journalists, bloggers, and folk who are not waiting for other folk to tell their story. And so a lot has changed. But of course, the struggles of Black people have also evolved, right? Mm-hmm. And has some things changed? Well, I think, a lot of issues have become more pronounced, right? We are in the age of demanding justice because of what we have seen with Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Tamir Rice in Cleveland, right across from Detroit. Eric Garner and Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, you name it. So those were not as pronounced 20 years ago. 20 years later, we're dealing with those things. And in the media space that I'm in, I've tried in my own way, creative ways, to use my platform to advance, issues of equity, racial justice, and so forth. And so when I say 2 decades, I'm basically reflecting on some of those important stories that I was able to take on and that were liberating in the Black community. And so the book, as I explained in this podcast, is a collection of stories written by people who have been impacted by the work that I've done. So I've written 4 books earlier than this. This is the 5th book, and each of the books that I've written in the past have been about me talking about, my view of democracy, and me basically, talking about how I have a beef with racism and, the issues that I think it needs to be done and all of that, how to make the world great and all of that stuff. But this time, this is basically people who have looked at my work, have examined my journalism, and basically talking about it in their own unique ways. For example, there's a sister in the book named Gwen Swanigan who I intervened in 2006 to save her son from going to prison when her son was falsely accused by police officers in the city of Taylor, Michigan, and another black boy, 2 black boys who were falsely accused of killing a white woman. And so I got in the case and championed that case, and within 2 months, all the charges were dropped.
Wow.
So those are the kinds of stories. So Gwen is speaking in the book about just the impact that I've had on the criminal justice system, that had it not been for my intervention and my willingness to take on that case as a journalist and write about it and champion it, which led to protests and all kinds of stuff in Michigan, that those boys would have been in prison today for a crime that they did not commit.
Wow. And that is strictly activism.
Yes.
And championing for different causes, and that's what I was trying to get the youth to understand. Anyone can be an activist.
That is right. That is true. That is true. That is true. If you're an engineer, you can be an engineer for justice. If you're a doctor, you can be a doctor for justice. If you're a lawyer, you can be a lawyer for justice. If you're a technician, you can be a technician for justice. Anybody can advocate for something.
Right. And the biggest one that I've been promoting around since we went to the Black Caucus in D.C.
Yeah, the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yeah, we got to meet Quavo, the rapper whose nephew was shot.
Right.
At a nightclub, I believe.
Right.
And ever since his nephew was shot, he started doing the Rocket Foundation, which is to help bring awareness to gun violence and regulating more gun laws. And he went to the White House to meet Kamala, and they've passed a bill, I believe, now around gun violence, or they have a team around.
Yeah, the White House just established the first Office of Gun Violence that is headed by the Vice President Kamala Harris.
Right.
Yes.
And I think having Quavo, everybody knows the Migos. Everybody knows Quavo. As soon as I said his name to the kids, they all started screaming, hollering. But they didn't know about the foundation. They didn't know about him doing this extra step towards something more positive outside of the music.
Right.
But I do love the fact that our entertainers are getting involved.
Yeah.
Basketball players. We went to Urban League, and CJ McCollum came.
Right.
And to see that, that's what's needed.
Yeah, and that's a big debate about entertainers becoming agents of social change, and I think that the template had been set long time ago for us as black folk in terms of the work that the late Harry Belafonte did. He was an entertainer, humanitarian, and was one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s closest confidant. And
he's on here somewhere.
yeah, so exactly. So that's one more on here. But anyway, this is a great podcast, by the way. For anybody listening, Dillard University Center for Racial Justice podcast is dope. It's really dope.
Thank you.
But we need entertainers to be involved with social justice, and I'm looking on the wall here. You got Tupac over there. I think he sang about the rose that grew out of the concrete. So, which means that there's possibility and that we cannot condemn black people, that everybody has potential in them. Everybody is born with potential. Nobody is born without potential. We have to find a way to harness the potential. So, in the words of Tupac, of course, the rose that grew out of the concrete. And entertainers can be involved in addressing some of those questions. And, of course, around criminal justice reform. What is happening to black men and women. Biggie Small talks about, stereotypes of a black male misunderstood. And if you don't know now, you know. That's a reality in terms of what has happened to black men and the issues. Those boys that I saved, those were black men in 2006 who were falsely accused by the Taylor Police Department. Had it not been for my intervention, they probably would have been in jail today.
Yeah.
And that's real. That's real. And that goes back to Biggie Small stereotypes of a black male misunderstood because white males are not misunderstood.
No.
They see their humanity.
Yeah.
So entertainers can play a role.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if you've heard, Taylor Swift is dating one of the football players. And then she posted said at her concert, everyone go vote. They got thousands of new voters registered now from her saying that one statement.
Yeah. Well, I remember when former President Barack Obama was campaigning in Ohio, and he was running in 2012 against Mitt Romney. And I remember Jay-Z did the opening for President Obama in Ohio, and Jay-Z said, I got 99 problems, but Mitt ain't one. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. We're gonna keep this podcast policy oriented, Lawrence. We're gonna keep it policy oriented and all of that, So, but anyway.
But it just shows how important or impactful music can be.
Yes.
To remember that, to know that, and to have them put their platform on the line to bring awareness, because that's all activism and social justice is about: making the community aware.
That's right. Well, it's true. when we think about just that, there's a lot of history with that. Stevie Wonder, the great Stevie Wonder, Motown legend. Stevie Wonder sang about you've not done anything. Yeah. You haven't done nothing. And Stevie Wonder was a great anti-apartheid leader. Basically campaigned for the release of Nelson Mandela. So I think in our heritage, in our black heritage, we have documented history. We have documented history of black entertainers around the world who have stood for justice. Whether it is Stevie Wonder, whether it's the late Hugh Masekela, one of the greatest international jazz icons, whether it is, Harry Belafonte, and now we have, up and coming, entertainers and so forth. So it's entertainment can be an important tool in that.
Yes, definitely. Well, that was all my questions.
All right. Well, those were very, very penetrating questions. Tia tried to get us on the other side.
Yeah.
We got 99 problems.
I should have said listen to it on that thing, huh? Well, because we're coming to you, and we're going to be doing some video aspects of it a little bit later, but we definitely want you to listen to us more. So where can they find us on these social media spaces?
You can follow us on Instagram at CRJ_DU. YouTube, the same headline.
And if you have any questions for us, maybe you're in an area where you don't feel like you can be an activist. We are both telling you right now that you absolutely can. If you have an issue that you want to ask us, feel free to go ahead and email us at ducenterforracialjustice@gmail.com. That again is ducenterforracialjustice@gmail.com. Well, that is all the time we have. We would like to thank you for listening to our very first show. If you hear anything in the background, that is our main director. That's going to be Dr. Esmail. I think we'll have him on the show next time. Just to kind of bring him into the party. But until next time, I am Lawrence Weber.
And I'm Tia Suggs, project coordinator.
There we go. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you for listening.